Okay, we are live, Sorors.
Awesome, thank you. Um, Welcome everyone to this next segment of our virtual Black-owned business series. This one is entitled Understanding the legal aspects of business law. So we're super excited to be having this very important conversation and so thankful for our guest, Attorney Daly. Before we get started, I would like for our second vice president to come forth with greetings from our chapter. Sir Moore? Oh, you're muted.
Yep. Greetings, everyone. Hello and good evening. So glad to have you with us this evening. Thank you, Sora Norfolk, for putting on yet another great opportunity for learning around businesses, and especially from our Black-owned businesses. We're so excited to have you as our guest. And on behalf of our president, Janice Baker, I am so glad to welcome you all to this event. This series is one that we know provides great information for everyone who listens in. And so we hope that you have your notepad ready to take some good notes and ask some good questions. And so thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Sora Norfolk, for all your good work. Thank you to technology for allowing us to be able to do this great work virtually. And thank you, Mr. Daly, for being with us this evening and sharing all of your knowledge. So enjoy, everyone, and have a great evening.
Thank you, Sora Moore. I appreciate you. Yes, I'm so happy to have you here, Will, my fellow Xavier Wright, and just long time, friend as well. I would love to first share your bio, and you can unmute at any time and all of that, but I would love to first just share your bio because it's pretty amazing. Will Daly Jr. is the founder and managing attorney of the Daly Law Firm, which is based in St. Louis, Missouri, and he is also a member of Harvey Daly with offices in St. Louis, Missouri. Will's law practice focuses on business and domestic litigation with a broad background in medical negligence, client counseling, and a standard-setting approach to all endeavors. Prior to opening his own firm, Will worked for 4 years at Husch Blackwell, representing physicians, nursing homes, Fortune 500 corporations, and individuals in matters involving labor and employment, toxic torts, and various areas of business litigation. He's currently licensed to practice in Missouri, Illinois, and the United States District Courts for the Eastern District of Missouri and the Southern District of Illinois. Prior to law school, Will worked for several years in commercial banking for 2 national bank holding companies in downtown St. Louis. And in addition to that, Will is also a former adjunct professor at the Washington University School of Law, where he facilitated classroom discussions and off-campus workshops regarding the intersection of education, race, class, and law in the United States. And during the unrest in Ferguson, Will served as the Deputy General Counsel of the National Bar Association, advancing efforts promoting transparency and accountability related to the disparate treatment of underserved communities across the country. Graduating with honor, Will received his bachelor's degree in finance from the amazing Xavier University of Louisiana and his law degree from St. Louis University. Will is a member of Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, and since college, he has served he's been a member since college. And then he also is a former associate general counsel and continues to mentor and motivate high school students to pursue educational opportunities at his beloved alma mater. So he lives here in St. Louis, and he is unashamedly the proud father of 3 children, Destiny, Alejandro, and Valentina. And so, Will, I had to read all of that because you have quite an extensive background, and it's like all encompassing and everything that as Greeks we stand for. So very honored to know you, honored to have you, and I just want to welcome you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm almost embarrassed to admit that when we were kind of setting up for this, I was testing my audio. And with Zoom, where you can test the sound and then you can test the mic, I tested the mic, and when it played back what I said when I was testing the mic, I thought it was an echo. And so y'all gotta bear with me, pray with me through this presentation, because my mind is going is a little slow. And I can't blame the COVID. My mother calls it the culprit. I can't blame the culprit because I've already been fully vaccinated and I didn't have any side effects. And so I don't know. So look, I am incredibly honored to be here today. I have nothing but the utmost respect and admiration for Delta Sigma Theta. Going back, honestly, before I even went to college, because it was kind of like my journey in Alpha. When I was looking for a fraternity, I looked at the men who I admired and were on a path that I wanted to one day follow. If I did the same thing with the sisters in this world, without question, the top and the best of the best are Deltas. And so I am truly honored to be here today, to spend a few minutes just to talk about business law and employment law. As my very dear friend Monique said, I'm a graduate of Xavier University, and we had a professor there named Father Linden. I loved Father Linden. He was a Catholic priest, stood about 6'5", brother, and he cussed. But I loved Father Linden. And one of the things that Father Linden said, he was very, very eloquent. And I can only hope to one day rise to the ability to articulate things the way that Father Linden did. But something he often said is that all facets of human emotion are contagious. And that's real. So I think that today, if I were to just read off a piece of paper, then that would not inspire you to engage or to participate. But if we open this up and we have a dialogue and a conversation, I guarantee you that I will match your energy note for note and find ways to liven the conversation if need be. I do have a list of questions I think that were submitted and some general topics. And what I'll do is I'll kind of give a brief overview in terms of how I see today's topic. And then if there are questions, then we can deal with those questions. If not, then we'll just go to the list, because you'll have a very well-rounded approach to or understanding of the way I see this. And so when looking at business law and employment law, if you will imagine a circle, just so everybody picture a circle, and you take your hand and just dip it in some paint and make a line down the middle. And there's a reason I say use your hand, because I want it to have a little bit of thickness to it. So we're going to put a line down the middle of this imaginary circle. On one side of it, we'll call that, let's say, transactional work. And what this circle represents is the legal atmosphere, the world of the law. So on the left side, we'll say that's transactional law. And with transactional law, that essentially means transactions. Agreements are things between individuals. You'll have your business law or corporate law. All of those things are on the transactional side of this circle. On the other side of this pie chart, we'll have what we call litigation. And litigation is what most people think of when you think of lawyers in the law. That's the adversarial process. That's where you have a degree of conflict. You have plaintiffs and defendants. You have petitioners and you have respondents. You have two people with competing interests who are unable to, unfortunately, resolve that dispute. And so they'll take that dispute to the court. And so in the court, there are different laws and procedures and guidelines and rules that we follow, but that's going to be your litigation side of the circle. And then in the middle is where you have overlap. You have certain things that are one part transactional and they're one part litigation. So if you would imagine a lease between a landlord and a tenant, that's a contract. It starts off as a contract. And ideally, the landlord and the tenant are partners in this thing of whatever the property is you're dealing with. But if there is a disagreement on the interpretation of that lease or that contract, then it's going to slide over to the litigation side, and they're going to go to court, and then the judge will interpret the law, apply the facts of their situation to the law, and then render a decision. So you'll have some things that are somewhat in between. For today's topic, when we look at business law and then employment law, when I use the phrase employment law, I'm really talking about labor and employment, or the relationship between an employee and an employer, and then the various agencies that deal with or govern those relationships. It's more so on the litigation side once there is a dispute or disagreement between the employer and the employee, but it absolutely is going to fall somewhat on the transactional side as well. when you may look at collective bargaining agreements. I think that there was a very publicized effort with Amazon to unionize. And so we look at, why do employees form unions? Why do employees find it beneficial to join together and in one united voice speak towards those issues or those concerns that they have? And so in that process, the collective bargaining process, you're going to have a contract. You may have something that is somewhat on the transactional side. And so I'll be clear to kind of point out between the two when we're talking about the business side or the corporate side versus the labor and employment side, dealing with those relationships. We're good?
Yep, that's excellent. No, that's really helpful to call that, because I think that in our community, sometimes those terms are used interchangeably, which is why I really did want us to talk about the difference between business and difference between employment law. And so I really am thankful to have you as an expert in that area. And also, as we're thinking about Black-owned businesses, there's so much that we often don't know because it's not shared with us. And we're kind of doing the best we can, but then we get into these situations which, leads to maybe that litigation side that we want to avoid if possible, but we also want to make sure that we are informed enough should we have to go in that direction. So this is kind of like, how do we make sure we are prepared so that we don't have to try to get prepared when something's happening? That's really the auspice for this. And that's, and it will be kind of conversational. So the way that we do all these is like, I'm going to go through and ask you questions in a conversational manner. And then we have a couple of our committee members who are really amazing. And what they do is they're looking on Facebook Live to see if there are any comments or questions. And so then they will share that with us and we'll be able to add that into the mix as necessary.
Absolutely. Okay.
So you want me to jump in?
I keep going, but if you got a different order.
No, I got you, attorney. No, I thought the attorney coming through. No, I got you.
Okay. So just jumping ahead, and it's great the way you just set that up, Monique, because I think it's important. We are in very unique times. And I struggled with this earlier today because I probably about 15 minutes before I jumped on, I looked at the video of the brother who is a lieutenant in the military who was pulled over and pepper sprayed. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at this video and then I'm getting myself into the zone to come here and speak. And what we find ourselves dealing with in this day and this age is almost like I don't even want to say that we've regressed. It's a reminder of certain things that still exist, certain challenges that still exist for Black people in the United States. And what I find available for us is we're both Black college graduates. I got my law degree from a PWI, and yet we have opportunities within the Black community. With COVID, we've seen now a rise in entrepreneurship of opportunities to, if you thought about starting your own business, to get out there and start your own business. Monique, I know you're a business owner. There are others here who are business owners and professionals. And so it's incredibly important as we endeavor to go down that path as a community that we avoid certain pitfalls, but then we also maximize our ability to make lasting changes and impacts so that our children will hopefully have a better opportunity than what we're seeing on the news right now. And so for anyone looking to start a business, before you even get to, I think some of the legal understandings, what I would strongly encourage is for you to figure out your why, W-H-Y, your why. There's a book by a man named Simon Sinek, and it's called Start with the Why. I would strongly encourage all of you to get that book and to read that book, because the most successful companies that we find, I think Amazon, Apple, the most successful companies that are out there are companies that determine their why they exist, mm-hmm. not what they do or how they do it, but why they exist. Mm-hmm. Who is going to what community, what audience are they going to serve? Mm-hmm. And so you determine that why. You know your audience, you know what's going on, and from there, then I say the two things that every business needs to have, every business, regardless of how big or how small, is a good accountant and a good lawyer. Got to have a good accountant and a good lawyer. And you're going to come back to those things. One of the biggest pitfalls that people have is individuals who seek to start businesses is they don't invest in the financial side of what's going on, and they don't invest in the legal side of what's going on. We have incredibly intelligent people in our community. It is not difficult to incorporate your company. You can go to Secretary of State's website, and in 20 minutes, from start to finish, you can incorporate your LLC, get you a tax ID number from the federal government, and have everything you need to go and open up a business banking account in 20 minutes or less. And so a lot of people will endeavor to do those things on their own without the advice of an attorney, because they figure, well, I don't need an attorney. The reality is that depending on your why and depending on the audience that you want to serve, there are other things that you may need to do prior to or in the early stages of setting up your business to make sure that you are properly protected. And so I'd say that a common pitfall that people have when starting businesses is missing on those points, missing on those areas and investing in those things to ensure that you will have a lasting business as opposed to just establishing a business from the start.
Absolutely. No, and I love that. And I feel like everything you said actually aligns with why we're even doing this series, which is the fact that we are in the midst of COVID-19. And for us, it's about sustaining those Black-owned businesses. And so throughout this this sorority year, we have had the opportunity to have people come on and speak from different aspects that are impacting our Black-owned businesses, or also provide information for our community members in general to just know from a Black-owned, from a Black business owner. And then one of the actual parts of the series focused specifically on starting your business. And so that was with Alice Herndon. And so that actually, what you just said, the accountant and the attorney are things that she definitely spoke to. And so I think it's really good that there's that alignment there and we're hearing that same thing. I do want us to kind of maybe back up. And well, actually, I think what you said is really a great segue into this. And like when we're thinking about, so first of all, it sounds like, yes, at the beginning, at the onset, we should be seeking an attorney. And that's not necessarily something that we always do. Because we usually wait until there's an issue and then it's like, oh goodness, I have to find someone. How do I know who's a good attorney? And so I guess, we also want to know what people should consider when they're seeking out a good business or employment law attorney. What are some red flags to be aware of? Because we know we also do sometimes get put in a precarious situation where we're needing that support and we don't really know what to look for. So what are some good signs of an attorney that would be the best fit, and what are some red flags? And maybe a minute,
Sure. I think that one of the things that you definitely want to think about is a good fit. Someone who understands the values, the beliefs, the philosophies of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Every attorney has one thing in common, and that is, at least every licensed attorney, you'll find one thing in common, and that is this is an individual who has passed the Missouri bar exam or the Illinois bar exam or whatever state you're in, you've passed the bar exam. So you meet the minimal qualifications to be an attorney. Minimal qualifications. You got a law degree from an accredited school and you passed that bar. What that tells you is that you are able to make it out of law school and you are able to test at least a minimal level. It does not give you any indication about the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the temperament, the personality, the beliefs of that attorney. And I think it's important for people who are interested to interview individuals. You want to look for someone who is going to fit the philosophy of your business, whatever it is that you're doing. You're going to want someone who can walk with crowds and keep his or her virtue, or talk with kings and nor lose the common touch. You're going to want an individual that has the ability to meet you where you're at. Sometimes, and I don't, no offense to the good brothers of Omega Psi Phi, but sometimes people will come to me and they say, "Well, I want you on my cases. You're a bulldog." I'm like, "No, I'm not. I'm an alpha." and so it's about attitude. So you want someone who has an attitude of being able to meet your needs. You also want someone that's qualified really to guide you in that area. In that area, most attorneys at some point in time in their careers, they're going to reach a degree of specialization. They're going to be subject matter experts in a particular topic. And so if you are looking to get into sports and entertainment. A lot of people say, hey, can you do a contract for me? Can you review this contract? Are you familiar with sports and entertainment? Yes, yes, and yes. However, I will concede that an attorney who practices only in or primarily in sports and entertainment, they're going to be better at that than I am, because they're dealing with the ins and outs of what's going on. And so sometimes people may be comfortable with someone. It may be a friend of a friend, a family member, or something along those lines, but you want to find someone who has the unique skills and experiences to really elevate you to where you're going. You don't want someone that every time you get an invoice, you'll see research and analysis on Missouri law or Illinois law on this particular topic. That's part of the investment. The attorney is supposed to come already knowing at least a basic understanding of what your business needs are. And so interview individuals, look at their website. I won't say that. Once upon a time, I heard someone say that if a lawyer or a law firm did not have a website, don't deal with them. I don't prescribe to that. However, it does tell you something when certain attorneys do not have websites, because they're old school. But they came up during the time when it was word of mouth, it was referrals, it was, I'm going to give you my business card, and it worked, and they did very well in that particular environment. And so it's a new day and it's a new age, and we are living in a society with not just Generation X, but Y, Z, millennials, and so on and so forth down the line. Businesses engage their constituents differently now. And so you want an attorney who's going to be able to even advise you on those issues, because those are things you have disclaimers on your website, on your print material, things along those lines. So you're going to want someone who's at least well-versed and familiar with those topics and those kind of ideas also.
No, that's great. So it sounds like, and I see that we have a question from Facebook Live, but it sounds like from what you're saying, we need to be able to ask them questions, see how familiar they are with our business type or model, if you will, and what their approach looks like, so that we can make sure we're selecting someone who's the best fit for us. And the question that came through Facebook Live is, should you keep an attorney on retainer for any future issues that may arise, or only when you are setting up the business or it's like newly launched?
Yes, you should absolutely have an attorney. But note that I said you should have an attorney. I did not necessarily say you need to have an attorney on retainer. What the Missouri Bar has done, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, it changed its nuances or its terminology. Historically, everyone is familiar with the retainer, which is an amount of money that you pay to retain this attorney. He or she will be on standby. You have a lawyer that's ready on call should you have a legal need. What the bar does now is allow attorneys to charge advance fees and costs. It operates similar to what a historical retainer was, but it's a payment that you pay in advance towards future legal work that you contemplate or that you're going to need. Depending on the nature and the size of an individual's business, there may not be a lot of litigation that they have. I have clients who I also do business with. My barber is one of my clients. And so it's like he has me, so to speak, on retainer for what we have going on. But in terms of his barber practice, or you may have a beautician with that particular practice, them investing $3,000 to $5,000 just to say I have an attorney would not, in my opinion, be a wise business move. But you need to have an attorney that you can retain or that you can utilize should you need one. So I think that depending on the scope and the size of a business, then that's when you make the decision in terms of whether you invest or how much you invest. But you should identify, if you have a checklist on what you do when you're setting up your business, you need to pick your lawyer, start up front. So you have an attorney that's there who will then be able to advise you as your business grows and evolves. The issues and the challenges that you're going to face in setting up your business are not the ones that you're going to face later on.
As your business grows, as you run into new challenges and new experiences, like you can't really plan for that all the time. There's some things, I'm thinking an attorney will be able to guide you on as, hey, in this field, you might want to be prepared that these are some things you need to be aware of could come up. But there's also some things that you just really couldn't plan for because maybe you didn't even know your business was going to grow like this, or COVID-19 was going to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Right.
yeah, super important. And I'm sure you're really great when you work with your barber because you want your hair to stay, right. So you make sure you're on point.
I'm just gonna say no comment on that because he may watch this video at some point. But we got an arrangement, so I think my face is gonna be tight probably for the next 15, 20 years. So
Okay, good. All right. It just made me laugh when you said that. I was like, I have to say something.
Yeah.
I do want to ask you, I don't know, well, I guess you've already explained really the difference between business and employment law. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else. I mean, because I think just having the general understanding is really what we wanted to cover for this part of the series, and then going deeper into some of the things like you're already talking about that we really want to make sure people consider. So is there
Right.
anything else you wanted to say about that?
Well, I will say this just to understand from on the employment side, on the labor and employment side, that it is more so on when I said that pie chart, the litigation side and the adversarial system. It's important to understand your rights. And when we start talking about rights and responsibilities, it's important as an employee to understand your rights, regardless of what your profession is. Understand your rights and recognize that we have something in Missouri called the Missouri Human Rights Commission and the Missouri Human Rights Act that gives you a basic set of liberties and things that have to occur if you are an employee. Also understand the risk that you take as an employee in Missouri. Missouri is what's called an employment at will state, which means that your employer can fire you at any time for pretty much any reason except for an unlawful reason. So an employer cannot discriminate against you in the decision to terminate your employment, but the employer can absolutely say, I think that I don't want you to work here anymore. And so understanding that part, and then when to engage an attorney as an employee and the type of attorney that you want to hire, those are generally done on a contingent fee basis. And so when you hire a lawyer to represent you in one of those types of cases, ordinarily you won't pay any fees to that lawyer unless or until that lawyer wins or collects funds on your behalf. Also understand as a business owner on the labor and employment side, what your privileges are and then your responsibilities are as an employer, something that has been talked about a lot, and it's a brand new area. The courts don't really have a ton of guidance on it because we've never dealt with it, is how do you deal with potential liability from an employer perspective with COVID? And there's legislation right now in the General Assembly seeking to address that, to pretty much say from an employer's perspective, you may own a restaurant. And you have customers who are coming in, so you got certain regulations and ordinances that you're dealing with and you need to be well versed on in that regard. And then you have people who work for you, and you want to make sure that they have appropriate protections and they're not exposing you to additional liabilities that come from this thing called COVID-19 that we're dealing with. And so having an attorney who can advise you and guide you on those kind of things is very important. However, to have a quote unquote labor and employment, remember I said people will specialize, to have you a labor and employment lawyer who is then going to advise you on your corporate needs or your business needs or your other non-labor and employment litigation needs and possibilities that may come up. You may have a vendor or a supplier that you need to sue. Don't fall into the trap of thinking that I'm gonna get a one-stop shop and this one lawyer is gonna be able to effectively handle everything. And this is another reason why I would say to the question about, should I just have a lawyer on retainer? Really what you want to invest in is what we call a general counsel. Now, for a mid-size or a large corporation, you're gonna have an in-house legal department. You're gonna have a lawyer, and you can compare it to your chief executive officer or your chief financial officer. Your general counsel is your chief legal officer to guide and direct the legal interests of that organization. A lot of stuff you may be able to handle in-house with that attorney or that group of attorneys. Other things you're going to outsource. And your general counsel will then be your manager to go and pick and retain the lawyer who's best going to do or meet those particular needs. And so what I would say is that for someone looking to have a lawyer on retainer, ask those questions about whether or not this individual could serve in a general counsel capacity. You know, ideally, you want to get the best bang for your buck is a well-rounded attorney who can handle most of your legal needs, but then to have someone who has the know-how, the wherewithal, and the relationships to go then and get another lawyer if something comes up.
It's special. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, that's a more specialized area, and they're like, okay, well, I know someone who does that. I think you also mentioned, so from an employment law standpoint, I think this is really important. It's kind of like, okay, there's really nothing due unless, you win the case, and then like the attorney gets their percentage. Let's talk about it from the business side as small business owners, and they have a situation with a client that now requires them to seek an attorney to help them manage that situation. And so then that's, from my understanding, that's not the same as the employment side. There's some money that you're coming out of pocket.
Is not. Those are hourly fees.
Mm-hmm.
And for in those types of situations, for the advice and counsel you'll get, generally the attorney will charge by the hour. And what you should look for from your attorney, first of all, never get into business with anyone, including an attorney, without a contract. You gotta get a contract. It may seem like common sense or basic.
No, but say it again.
You gotta get a contract. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu says that if someone comes talking peace, but doesn't have a peace treaty, that person is scheming. It's the same way in business. You gotta get a contract, put it in writing, because if it's not in writing, it doesn't count.
Nope.
So, and so on when retaining or getting a lawyer, you want to have someone that, number one, has a contract. I generally would like to go over the contract if I'm involved in that part of the initial engagement, just so you'll understand the rights and the responsibilities in that agreement. But you want to make sure that it covers various things, that it makes sure that it speaks on confidentiality, because the moment you retain an attorney, then that's your attorney. And the duty of confidentiality will extend beyond the end of that case. You shouldn't have to worry or wonder about your lawyer going and telling or using anything that you've said against you. There's a conflict of interest policy. Every client that I have, I tell them on day one, you never have to worry about seeing me on the other side of a courtroom. The only way that I could do that is if you signed a conflict waiver to permit me to do that. And I still wouldn't do that because my mama taught me better. Yeah, my mama taught me better. You just don't do that, shady. And so now you can represent, it would not be a conflict to represent someone who had a dispute with the client in something totally different. So if you were engaged in litigation with someone and that person hired me to prepare a will, and in theory, I could do that because it wouldn't involve betraying those confidences. But again, sometimes the optics just don't look right. It's like, okay, so you want to make sure that those things are addressed in the agreement. In terms of the pricing, you're going to have a wide range of hourly rates. And I would never tell someone that he or she is not worth what they're charging. I think that we all, as individuals, we're priceless. And so our services are something that is hard to quantify. But there are certain things that I would say the market will tell you with respect to what's a fair amount to pay for certain types of cases and then certain types of attorneys. You want to look at the experience, but not just the years or the longevity, but you want to look at the results, because you may have some people that's been losing cases for 25 years. And so you come in, I'm a 25-year attorney, but you won 3 cases. And so
that's a good point.
Right. So you want to look at the content, and then you also want to, I think that, God gives us common sense for a reason. You want to listen to your gut. And if you're getting a good vibe in that conversation, then explore it a little further. If you're getting some red flags and some doubts and some suspicions, say no more. Don't second guess those things, because there are tons of lawyers who are out there. And so you'll have your advance fee that you pay. You'll have an hourly rate. Insist on getting itemized bills. If you get an attorney that gives you an invoice and they don't have what we call a task billing to show you, most lawyers will divide their time by the 10th of an hour. So you want to see if it's 0.8 charged against $325, you want to see what they did for those 0.8, that 8/10 of an hour. You want to see how that time was utilized, and then ask, does this add value to the client relationship? And if it does not, don't pay it. We don't negotiate enough. So when you get that bill, you know, my engagement letters that has language that says that if you dispute any of these charges, let me know. If you don't, then I'm going to take it that you felt that I provided value. So if you don't pay me later on, we may have a different kind of conversation. If you get that bill and there's something on there and it's like, I really don't see the value in, you know, me paying you $325 to make copies for 3 hours. No, don't pay for somebody. You may have to pay for paper, but don't pay for the labor expended, the time expended to make 3 hours worth of copies. And so you can push back and you can challenge those things and say, this didn't provide value to me. And then watch.
Like, I mean,
yeah, we got to pay for the paper. We pass those. We
but
pay
that's
those.
probably a $325 fee. Y'all
No. If you get a roof built, they charge you for labor and then for the shingles. They don't just say, I'm gonna spot these shingles for you. You pay for the shingles, don't you?
Yes.
You pay for the shingles.
I'm just saying, from a consulting standpoint, it's like we build in those types of things into our costs, so we know.
You could.
Yeah.
You could. Some people may do that. Now, but the last point I want to say about this in terms of when you're getting this contract and you're setting these things up and you're looking at these points is that probably around when the real estate downfall hit in 2006, 7, 8, around that time, and you had a ton of people that went back to professional school. You had a ton of businesses that failed and whatnot. Lawyers and law firms got creative. And so what happened about 10, 15 years ago is what we started to see is that firms started to diversify their billing options. So you didn't have to pay by the hour. Some people would give you a flat fee. Some would do what I call a blended or a hybrid fee that says that if your hourly rate gets up to this dollar amount, then it'll convert to a flat fee and you won't be on the clock anymore. And so it's been utilized in other industries outside of law for years. Physicians,
that's what we do, definitely.
Yeah, it's been used for years, and lawyers have just been slow to catch up with that. But as a consumer, you have power, and so when negotiating with your attorneys, ask for those types of options because you have a budget, and you may say, look, if it's going to cost me more than X amount to defend this case or to fight this case, then see if you can settle it for $3,000 or $4,000 less, and I'll just cut the check. It's called the cost of defense, and so do not be afraid to negotiate on regardless of who the lawyer is. Do not be afraid to negotiate on those particular terms.
I love that. No, that's all like extremely powerful, and I think oftentimes in our community, when there is someone who's in a position of power, or I'll say in a professional position, there is a sense of fear with questioning that, whether that be doctors, attorneys, or otherwise. And what we really have to realize, I say this is my analogy would be for the doctors, like they work for me. Our community has, they work for you, whether your insurance is paying it, you don't have to pay anything out of pocket or not. They work for you. And so that is a mentality that we have to definitely overcome because of how we've been, treated over the years, and what we've been taught is you don't ask questions, you don't challenge people. And we have to realize that we do deserve to do that, whether, even on the legal side, because we need to make sure we fully understand things. Like I heard you saying, I walk through this stuff, this information that's in the contract with my client, or my proposed client. And so that's important. If there's an attorney, I would think, that's not willing to break things down for you, and even throughout the process, you're not, being engaged and, understanding everything, that sounds like that would be a concern and a red flag. I do have another question I want to ask you, but I don't know if you have anything you want to say in response to that.
No, it's this, I concur with everything you just said.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. And I do want to also notate before I ask this question that though we should get an attorney at the beginning, and correct me if I'm wrong, we likely can always engage an attorney. Just because we didn't do it at the beginning, which is the best practice, it doesn't mean we can't do it. Is that correct?
That is very correct. Yes.
I just don't want some people to feel like, oh, I didn't do this, so now, here I am, and until there's a situation.
It's like, it's kind of like going to the doctor. You may have preventative medicine where you go to the doctor when you're healthy, and the doctor will say, hey, you're doing a good job. Keep this up, watch your cholesterol, so on and so forth. And then you have people who don't go to the doctor until they're sick. And so you then have rehabilitative medicine that goes in and says, yeah, you kind of messed this up. Let's go in and fix it. The same physician will be available at any point along that journey. And it's never too late to go in and get that additional professional assistance to meet your needs.
I love it. That was such an awesome analogy. I feel like that just broke it down where any of us can understand it. That's perfect. I know there are several other questions, but I really want to make sure that I ask this, since we are talking about operating in a pandemic. How have you seen the pandemic impact business and employment law? You know, how have you even had to pivot during this pandemic as an attorney?
My plan still is to go back this week. I have not worked from my office in Clayton since March 16, 2021. Wow. I'm in my house right now. And so it's we were blessed and fortunate enough that, to the extent we wanted to continue working from the office, we were listed as those essential workers and had the ability to do so. However, we didn't. We shut it down and let everybody work from home. My law partner still managed to come in a lot, but we then utilized the technology that was available, and many other law practices I know of all sizes follow that same path, because that's what we were advised to do. And I think that was the responsible thing to do, because no one knew what to expect. If you think back to the earliest days of the COVID, I remember me and my line brothers, we thought we were on top of the game, because it was a run on toilet paper. And we said, what we're gonna do, we're gonna corner the market on wipes. Everybody running to get toilet paper, we gonna get the wipes. There's no limit on the wipes. They're always available, and there was. So we went and got all these wipes, flushable wipes, whatever. We got all these wipes, and I still got all these wipes a year later. So Alpha's always out thinking themselves. We went and got all these wipes, but no one knew what to expect. You had to run on the toilet paper, the Lysol. It was no one knew what this thing was going to do. And so when we look back just in the past year of how quickly we've become informed as to what works, what didn't work, appropriate context, and we've actually shifted the entire culture of the country in interpersonal relationships and whatnot. Business and law has responded the same way. I read that I think St. Louis County is about to resume jury trials. You have to think about it. We had a justice system that depended on, when we look at trial by jury, that's one of the hallmarks of American laws, that you can get 12 individuals, a jury of your peers, who would come in, and those individuals would decide the facts in terms of what happened. They would determine guilt or innocence. And the powerful thing about a trial by jury is that the jury can look at you while you're testifying and look in your eyes and the mannerisms and the tone of voice and the inflection, and then to determine whether or not this person is being truthful. We lost all of that. So imagine people who, just on the criminal side, who were charged with things that may not have actually happened the way that they were charged. The courts had no idea on what we were going to do, because nobody in 2020 was alive back in 2019 or 1919 or whatever the last pandemic was, to advise us on what we were supposed to do. We can read things, but nothing was there. And so for our practice, we followed the science. And as Xavier writes, you know that one of the things that we're blessed to is that we have direct contact with every type of physician you can find. But even beyond Xavier, I would dare say, because I know several Delta physicians who are in town, you all have in-house experts who can guide you on, this is the fact, these are the facts, this is fiction. And so we're blessed as a Divine Nine community to have experts who can kind of let us know on how to do those things. Likewise, on the legal side, going back to the question, there are, what we found is that from a labor and employment perspective, there were prior guidelines that employers would require. Sometimes, let's say, for example, people in hospitals, they were required to get flu shots. And if you did not get a flu shot, that could be grounds for termination. That had been litigated, and it could happen. With COVID, you really can't fire somebody that fast because we don't know what it's going to do to your body. We don't have the testing. We don't have the data to do that. And so hospitals were strongly encouraging it. And then it may have evolved to now getting to the point where some frontline workers are required and so on and so forth. But that was something that we had to look at, what degree of liability that I'm having. I represent, one of my clients is the Ethical Society of Police. And so I have a lot of police officers that I represent, and they had issues and situations in the department where there were outbreaks of COVID. How is that going to get treated? Well, it would fall under workers' compensation. It would be treated as an on-the-job injury. Just again, something for people on an employment side with your businesses you want to look at, whether or not you have to obtain and have workers' compensation insurance is going to be a factor of how many employees you have. Whether they're full-time or part-time really wouldn't matter. And so for certain small businesses, you may think that, well, I really don't need to get workers' comp insurance. Right there with your accountant and your lawyer, get you a good insurance agent, because he or she can advise you on the different types of insurance that are available. And you may really be ill-advised to not have workers' compensation insurance. And this is something that transcends COVID, but in a COVID environment is really something that you want, that businesses want to look at. And so I think that what I would say or encourage people to be mindful of is to start off on the local level, whether you're in St. Louis City or St. Louis County, and to some extent St. Charles County, because I think that the regulations there may not be as intense as what you find in St. Louis City and St. Louis County. They exist. And so look at your local ordinances, look at your local health department, look at the regulations for businesses that will engage the general public. And then be conscious of the fact that you have folks that are looking. I told my line brother I was going to figure out a way to work this analogy in. He gave me earlier today, and I just got it. Rashad Perkins, if he watched this later on, but he made a point earlier, something that you always want to do. In the Bible, God told Daniel to spy the land. You have to go out and spy the land. You want to see what's going on in that particular area. Spy the land with respect to these ordinances and what's happening, because we saw in St. Louis City, several businesses were shut down because they were not enforcing the mask policies. Now, this was prior to the vaccine. I think things are now starting to go in the other direction. But the health department didn't just find that out by
looking to call your business out. They're looking for
they had some 21 Jump Street. They had some agents who was undercover looking at this stuff. And so recognize that, there are entire departments in city government that they go out, just like you have building inspectors, you have health inspectors, you have people who are going to look to ensure that those policies are being followed. And so spy the land, see what's going on, have you whatever the necessary insurance protections that you need, and then also use common sense. I think that what some businesses are seeing is that historically they required people to come to work. Even folks who were in telemarketing positions, they may have been behind a computer all day. They had very little to no actual client contact. What vast industries have discovered is that the employees are just as effective working from home, whether it's part-time or full-time, just as effective working from home. Now, there was a question, and this is again on the labor and employment side of that pie chart. Do employers have to provide workers' compensation insurance or protection for an injury that occurs when you're at your house while on duty? Yes. And so you still want to make sure that if you're going to permit your workers to work from home, then look at what their house looks like. Look at what's going on. Make sure that you have safety and guidelines and policies that will pretty much encourage the workers to then be careful, just like they would if they were in the office building doing something. And so I think that we've seen a shift. And I think we're heading towards a new paradigm with respect to employee relations, because we now recognize that the way of doing something, just because that's the way it was always done, isn't necessarily the best way. And so that's, I think another thing that's going to be here, it's going to be here permanently, just like when the tragedy of 9/11 happened and we totally shifted airline travel. I think we're going to see some permanent shifts as a result of COVID in the way that businesses operate and function.
I agree. No, I agree. And that's why this is so important. And I wanted to make sure that our committee connected with you, because there are some changes and there's some information that we never considered before, and we need to. And so, you know, I thought about a couple of these. I had another follow-up question to that, but I also thought about the fact when you're discussing employment, workers' comp insurance, you know, the fact that, and this is something we've already discussed in other parts of the series, but the importance of insurance. You know, no matter how small your business is, at a minimum, you need general liability, and you need, you know, if you do have anyone who works with you, some, you know, EO, you know, liability, and that's even for consulting firms, that where everyone is a consultant and not an actual employee. I want to ask you from a workers' comp standpoint, for those companies that don't necessarily have employees, how does that work out? Is that even a necessity?
I kind of think you answered the question. What workers' compensation is designed to cover is a workplace injury. It will provide, we'll look at a percentage disability. So this employee is going to earn or be less able to work as he or she was prior to the injury. And so this is something that's designed to fill in the gap and to still compensate someone so that he or she will still be able to go on with their lives despite the injury that occurred while he or she was at work. If you don't have anyone who's at work, then it may not be something that runs a risk. However, you would have to then look at your 5-year, your 10-year, your 20-year goals. Is this something that you intend on doing at some point? And then also, do you work as a one-person enterprise, or are you in a situation where you may sometimes contract, have an independent contractor and things along those lines? I think that your insurance experts probably addressed all those ins and outs. And I would encourage people to look at that part of the series, but that's the same consideration that you're going to have when looking at the workers' compensation piece, is to don't just look at that question based off of what you're doing right now. Look at that question from a long-term perspective and then build it into your budget. Make that something that, okay, at this point, this is when we need to go and activate the workers' comp side of what we have going on.
I like that, because that gets into, I mean, just having a plan. A lot of times, especially for, you know, not for every business in our community, but for a lot of them, especially now we're looking at people starting businesses in the midst of a pandemic, it just kind of might have become a catchy thing. Like, this is something I'm really good at, or I needed to supplement income, or whatever it is. I've got more time now to pursue what I've wanted to. And so they move forward with it, but without putting some of those necessary pieces in place and without thinking where I'm going to be down the road, because a big part of this is about sustainability. And that's why our committee has focused on various topics, because we don't want people to just start a business, and we don't want people to just be successful for a period of time. We want them to think long-term, what does this look like for my business? And so I love that you brought that up. I do have a question. I know we only have a few more minutes left, but I wanted to ask you, so this is kind of a follow-up question with the pandemic component. And I don't know if there's an answer to this, so this is literally just a question. But as businesses now have had to kind of just shift, and we didn't plan for a pandemic because no one, like you said, we weren't alive during it, you know, so no one knew to plan for that, whether it was in the contract or, you know, if it's in your business plan or anything like that. So I don't know, is there an answer as to how we incorporate, do we incorporate something like that into a contract? Do we incorporate something like some other pieces that would prepare us for the next unexpected thing? Or is it kind of like when you get there, that's when you figure it out?
It's, I think we always should look towards having protections in place. I think that's where your general liability insurance or something along those lines are going to come into being. I'm more of a glass half full type person, and so I would always encourage people to I feel like one of those old 70s singers, like, my name is Will and I'm an Aquarius. I'm also very idealistic. And so what happens is that my answer to this is informed by those two things. Is that I am an idealistic person, but I'm also seeking to find the good. And so get you a good insurance policy, but do not get stuck in the paralysis of analysis where you are so bent on the negative, right?
Yeah.
You're looking and trying to prepare for any and every possible negative thing that's happening, and you're suddenly putting those vibes into the universe. God got you. And so I think that it's one of those situations, and yes, before the fact, you'll have something as much as possible, some kind of catch-all general provision that's going to cover unforeseen types of situations. But then where you find yourself, what I would look at is to shift the question a little bit, is that when you find yourself now in COVID, go back and renegotiate. Go back and renegotiate certain things. If you have a lease, or your lease may be up for renewal, or you have a lease that's still in place, go back and say, look, I just got shut down. The health department said, or we can't do or perform the way we ordinarily would be able to. We have business interruption, things along those lines from happening. We need to tweak this part of the lease. Everything's negotiable. And the alternative then for the landlord would be, okay, so do I dig in and I sue you? And even if I win, you're done, and I'm going to lose out on all the possible benefits that will come long term. Or do I work with you to preserve the relationship, and then I'll make this difference back up on the tail end once we all get out of this pandemic? What I found is a lot of my clients have had success with the latter. They've been able to go in and to renegotiate things. They've been able to renegotiate things because of the pandemic. And that's what I would encourage people to look at. Have your things lined up for unexpected possibilities, but then also for the big one that we now have, do not hesitate or be afraid to go back and renegotiate some things.
That's powerful. I don't think that, honestly, I don't think too many people have thought about that and known that that's an option. That's why I love that you said everything's negotiable. It can go one way or the other, but you can negotiate anything. And unless we do advocate for ourselves, the answer is always going to be no. And so we need to at least give it a try. And it is that same sense of someone being in a certain position where people feel they're more powerful than they really are, because they need you too. They need you to be paying that, rent or whatever it is, that lease, because if you're not, then they don't have that income, and they're not guaranteed to replace it. And especially during COVID, they weren't guaranteed to replace it. A lot of buildings had to really kind of just shut it down and deal with it. But I definitely, I'm looking at the time, I've enjoyed talking with you, and I feel like, so many people have learned from you, myself included. And I just thank you for giving of your time and sharing your knowledge. And before we get off though, I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to share anything else you want. I feel like we didn't get through so many things we could have talked about, so we may have to bring this back again, just to follow up.
Look, this has totally been an honor. And I think it was very well put together. I think it's serving a very big need in our community. So I just commend the St. Louis Metropolitan Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta for this, and then all the other things you all do in the community. So anytime that you all would have me, I would love to come and share. And just thank you again.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you as well. So, and just thanks for all the kind words, and thanks for everything you're doing too, because you do a lot of community service. You not only, this is a side of that. Not everyone would give up their time like this. So just really value you and appreciate you. And I feel like so many people have been blessed by this information. It'll still be available for them to watch for however long they want. It's going to be up there on Facebook. And it's going to be on our YouTube channel and all of that. So thank you again. And I can't wait to reconnect with you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.